Welcome to the 12th podcast, a podcast where we dig into the fascinating world of sports carries and developments. In today's episode, I have a guest who brings a very unique perspective to the table. It's none other than Jeremy Salley, licensed FIFA player agent and a sports development strategist based in the United States. Jeremy, welcome to the 12th podcast. Happy to have you here.
Hey, Christoph. Thanks for having me, man. Very, very happy and excited to be here.
Let me start with, I've been really excited to do this episode for way too long with you. I mean, it involved quite a bit of planning, but I'm very happy we actually managed to get on. It's a very unique episode we're having this time because we're actually going to explore intersection of global and I think mostly European football with the American landscape. And of course, people who already watch this podcast, who listen to this podcast for a longer time, they know we're mainly oriented on the European market. Now we are going to explore something that I think is getting more and more attention every single year now, especially with Lionel Messi's recent move to Major League Soccer, to Inter Miami. American football landscape has definitely gotten into the spotlight. So I'm very happy to be able to have you here and discuss for you maybe also to shed a light on this very dynamic phenomenon the American landscape is. Jeremy, in this podcast, and how we start every single episode is by getting our guests sort of get them know a bit better. We have 3 introduction questions prepared. Same questions asked to every single one of our guests. You also will be asked those, so there's no escaping. Jeremy, are you ready?
Bring them on. Let's go.
Let's have it. Well, the first thing I would like to know is, what did you study at school?
So I'll start from my undergraduate degree. I went to University of Southern California, fight on, always for the rest of life. I studied international relations as my major and minor in film, which USC is noted for its film program, like Ryan Coogler for Black Panther, whatnot as well. So most of my day was spent a lot on the diplomacy and in the commerce side, particularly of international relations. And funny enough, like I always say that I didn't, when I was in undergrad, for a good portion of it, I didn't think about going back into sports. My background was very sports oriented in my childhood, and through my family background. But when I got to college, I was like, yeah, no, those days are done. Every paper I ended up writing was about some sports topic related to international relations, and the bug just kind of hit me again. And for my graduate work, I am a proud member of the 22nd edition of the FIFA Master. The FIFA Master, for those who don't know, is a year-long program in conjunction with CIES in Switzerland and FIFA, which takes place at 3 universities: in the Montfort University in Leicester, UK, SDA Bocconi in Milano, Italia, and University de Neuchâtel in Neuchâtel, Switzerland. And so proud member, proud American alum of the program, and those are my academic background, you could say, focusing on the sport. And that's what brought me to the pivot to football, soccer. Either way, I don't care how people say it, honestly. Like, I always feel like people get involved and it's like, oh, it's soccer, it's football. Bro, it's whatever you want to call it, man. It's the same game either way. It's 11 on 11 when you do it.
It's a very good way. It's a very good way to actually piss some people off. Let's leave it there. We're gonna get into your career starts, career beginnings, and the whole career journey a bit later on. But what was your first ever job?
My first ever job, paid or unpaid. So we talk about paid. In high school, I worked at a pizzeria named Jet's Pizza. It's noted. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia originally, but it's a chain based on Detroit, Michigan style of pizza, which is, Chicago. People know Chicago style, which is very thick. Detroit's is actual civilized pizza, like regular people, but is also pan pizza that's cut up in a pan. So it was based on that, and my first job was literally just on the line, just making pizzas. Would take home 2 or 3, magically maybe 4 or 5 every other time I slip out. But for the most part, that was my first job paid. I guess my first unpaid job was probably something within the recreational system back home in Atlanta. My dad's worked in the county school system for 25 plus years, also coached American football. So mostly something along those lines where I thought I was getting paid. I didn't by my father and anyone around me. So that, but paid-wise, high school, I think that's the first one.
Nice one. I think I should have done more homework, to be honest, when it comes to. I have no idea how to picture a Chicago pizza and a Detroit style pizza, and it's just I know what an Italian pizza would look like, but
Yeah.
when you just went.
We have a lot of people don't understand. America, we're a country of 330 million. We are I think we're still the third largest country after China and India. 330 million people live in this country, so just I really, the more you travel in this country, the more you realize that it has a lot of similarities in its structure, relatively, not entirely because, of course, nations of the EU, but every state has its own identity truly to it. Yes, American laws, but they really are, in some cases, you can argue, really just foreign places, it feels like. So this is like one of the craziest things. Like, say, Detroit deep dish and Chicago deep dish, you're like, what's the difference? You talk to folks in the Midwest, they will go to war about it.
Nice. I think we're gonna dig into the aspects of American culture a bit later on this episode. But just to finish off the introduction, Jeremy, what or who is your biggest inspiration in life?
My parents, easily say. I think it relates definitely in the workspace too. My mom worked in the NBA for 5 years for Sacramento Kings. And I saw it at an early age. It's a privilege to say that I grew up in sports. I grew up in the business of sports. And so I was a little kid running around the facility for Sacramento Kings. I was the kid in the facility that was running around, me and my little sister. And I got to see early on the real nature of the sport. I think that's the inspiration to see, hey, what my parents had to experience from their different lenses in the sporting world to where I am now, those are the inspirations. And of course, the goal is to make sure that for the rest of the family, that it makes all the sense in the world and keep them going. So they are really what's drive and get up in the morning. Also, my niece and nephew, they also like the reason why I get up in the morning and get this work done. So it's family.
Nice one. A lot of people actually say this on this podcast, that the biggest inspiration, the biggest source of inspiration is their family. It's always super nice to hear that. That was the introduction. I hope that you guys have been able to build Jeremy's profile in your heads a bit, that you know what he's like. We're going to move on now with the podcast. We're going to dig deeper into his journey. First of all, what I would really like to know is, how does someone actually become a player agent and a consultant? What was the path for you? What inspired you to pursue exactly this career path? Was it some sort of an event, or you just had this idea in your head like this?
I'd say it was for becoming a player agent. It was a come to Jesus moment. I'll say that I definitely had a come to Jesus moment for that pivoted me into that trust. That's a day that I will never forget as long as I'm living. But before I did the FIFA Master, I was actually already a consultant. So I worked in the NCAA college consulting space, where I started as project director at Collegiate Consulting, which focuses on college sports, particularly in Division I, Division II space. So for a lot of the movement that's happened in conference realignment in the college sports space, so like basically all the big universities, right? There's been, over the past 4 or so odd years now, a lot of movement, including my own university, USC, as we move to the Big Ten, and UCLA are crosstown rivals as well, the same way over, and a few other Pac-12 members. But I worked on a lot of those things at different levels of it, D2 and D1, a lot of the aspects of figuring out a lot of the issues in college sports, whether it be pertaining not only to just if we're happy where we are, but we focus a lot on the mental health side of things. We focus a lot of the day-to-day structural issues that universities had in athletic programs. And so that was something that really stuck out, was just simply helping other folks. And that's what led to the consulting part. And it's something I really do enjoy doing. The player agency side, a little bit different. I really stumbled upon it. Like I said, a come to Jesus moment happened, but going about what made sense for me. I think in consulting, you're doing a lot of consulting as an agent anyway. First off, it's a fiduciary business. You're an advisor. You are to be the confidant. You're to help your client get to the next step where they need to be. To go through the process, of course, there is the FIFA licensing program that just came back into fold as it needs to, in all honesty. First off, anyone says that they don't need that the license doesn't need to happen is flat crazy. There needs to be some type of standard across the world. And then it gets a little bit more into the countryside of it. It's a little bit more challenging to really shake on, but bottom line, that's probably the biggest part. Took the exam in Chicago at U.S. Soccer. When they had their exam, they put on in, passed it. Fees of the nature, the continued development, the representation of minors, a lot of the other aspects that make an important part of why you become an agent. And yeah, it's kind of where it started. And afterwards, the network I had already with clubs here in the U.S. and also over in Europe, and players as well, saying, hey, I know a guy who knows a guy who's in a situation. He talked to him. It's kind of like how a lot of my first clients came, was just kind of, hey, I know a guy. And afterwards, okay, well, I know a guy too. So let's figure this out, have a conversation. A lot of the work is very much personal, where some conversations aren't about the team or about how the season's going or things of nature. It's simply, hi, how's your day been? And being the first person to really ask somebody how their day has been as professional athletes. It's not something you really think about, but when this is your livelihood, the dynamic changes towards the sport and both ends. So for some guys, it is as simple as, hey, how's your day? And other times it's as simple as trying, and also as complicated as trying to figure out 1,000 different ways of context when it comes to EU, US, name an Asian country here, law. So it varies.
Apparently, player agent is definitely a field where you need to be professional in many other different fields.
Yeah.
I think we can both agree that when it comes to player transfers and sort of all of these big moves, but not only big moves, but all the moves involved, there's a lot of different regulations involved that are making it harder for you as a player agent. How do you navigate this very complex field of these regulations involved in player transfers and contract negotiations?
A lot of reading. I'm thankful for my academic background, for my training for it. I feel as if that's something that is misunderstood a lot of times, is that you do a lot of the reading, a lot of the background to understand what is applicable in law and applicable in the laws of the place you're at. There's a reason why most agents are lawyers by trade, especially we forget in comparison to where there isn't really an educational requirement for a FIFA agent exam, for agents licensing in FIFA. But here in the US, in the NFL, you have to have a JD, right? Which is a Juris Doctor, which is basically a law degree here in the US. In the NBA, they did try and failed because of Rich Paul. The Rich Paul rule is known for having a college diploma as well to represent guys, which once again is a little more challenging in the NBA because of structure. But most agents here in the US are educated in that way too, which brings out the part of just having the background to be able to come forward to law. And I think like around the world, I find it baffling that many people don't have a background in any type of academic sense to do this work. And of course, like, I'm not saying the degrees is not going to tell you exactly what everything is, but I think that's like probably the biggest part to how. I think I'm just a savant. I love reading. I've always loved reading since I was a kid. And that's kind of like I was a kid who read the encyclopedias, like a little dweeb. And that's just what brought me into it as well, to kind of like the knowledge of that nature and also knowing the intricacies of different laws. MLS, USL, they are challenging, knowing exactly what it is, especially on the agent side where some of his guesstimates, in all honesty, when presenting client things of nature, let alone going to a European club as well. But I think that a lot of the sustainability in rules and financial rules that can play, you have are for the better. And I think also the fact of the trickle-down effect. I mean, really did not spend money this year, or this January. January window was dry. And you saw the effect of that to a lot of different leagues where they thought a guy might go, or they had to hold on plans here or there because of the fact that the plans in the transfer window just didn't work. So it's one of those things that's really, it's a challenge. It's a challenge you go through on a day-to-day basis, like every other position in the sporting world. But the trickle-down effect of what's happening, let's say even in Malaysia, to my day-to-day life is actually fascinating, per se. You are connected. It's interconnected, everything about it.
when you were talking about the complicated laws in the MLS. It just always makes me think of me trying to play Football Manager, trying to play Football Manager in the MLS, just figuring out all the different transfers, all the different rules, and all the salary caps. Just let me tell you, my season with Houston Dynamo ended very, 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 very soon. Very, very soon in it.
They have a beautiful stadium. Houston's a wonderful. If you ever get a chance, Houston is like the brother city to sister city to Atlanta. Houston's wonderful. If you ever get a chance to go, amazing city. Love Houston. Flat
nice
out.
one. Nice one.
Gotta mention it in there. I love Houston.
Nice one. Let's talk maybe about your clients for a bit. Can you disclose how many clients you have at the moment, as in terms of players you actually represent?
12th at the current moment. That's going to probably, in the current moment, it's going to probably add it almost like maybe 3 or 4 in the next coming weeks. Of course, you're always recruiting in that case too, in all honesty, but currently 12 at the moment. I'm like, and also legally, I know that because some of ages and the nature, that is a little less I can disclose, but the board works say 12.
When you think of your guys, of your athletes that you represent, what would you say or depict are the toughest challenges they have to face? And I mean, let's maybe even talk in a general spectrum over, maybe talk about younger athletes. How can they overcome those challenges as well?
Preparation around people, for people around them. You go from, in a lot of countries, especially at a higher level and a more elite level, you go into the top 0.1% of earners on this planet. And the money that's thrown in to professional football. MLS average, what's the median right now, is just, I want to say 490 some odd thousand, just under $500,000 USD. You're already within the point percentage of earners in the entire United States. And granted, the money's maybe it goes a little bit longer in Columbus or probably somewhere like Kansas City than it does in New York or the Bay, but still you're in that top percentage. You're in a desired field, and a lot of the things around it, preparation financially, socially, the spotlight on you. It's a privilege to play this sport for a living, but at the same time, there's a lot of commitments and responsibilities that are thrust upon athletes. So getting them to understand that on one end, and on the other end, for guys that are just getting going, trying to break through, the reality of pro sports. FIFA just did the numbers: 130,000 professional footballers on this planet, guys that get paid to do this. It's just not that many. And in the US, the numbers like what, 2,800, if I remember correctly, around those lines. I mean, I'm in both DC and Atlanta, back and forth. And I mean, I can tell my block alone here in DC that there's at least 3,000 people, right? So you talk about gets fit almost contingency of every player in the US on this block, essentially. So it just kind of brings to light how hard it is to get one of those spots into one of the leagues here. And so I think for one end is kind of like the management of that. The other end is that, and I think just keeping it, because it's an everyday thing where someone's trying to take your spot. And the mental capacity that some guys need, some guys don't have, and I hate to say it, some guys don't have to really know that, hey, my talent has brought me here, but the work ethic, the understanding, the coachability, being coachable, will keep me here. And it doesn't matter how many goals I scored last season. That's great. That was last season. More matters than what you're doing tomorrow, because we play tomorrow. I think fans have this memory sometimes is very short, and knowing that you may run out of goodwill in some cities in some cases. And I mean, that's just reality of this nature and this beast that is pro football soccer.
How important is it for these guys to have a strong support system? Let's say mentors, some agents throughout their careers, and maybe also a follow-up question to that: do you, as a player agent, do you actually foster these connections?
Yes and yes. I think the first part going to like is important because of the fact that I think I think there's sometimes the important thing with agents that you have to know how much you guys need you, how much you don't. I'm very honest with agents. I'm not their fathers. To my clients, I'm not their fathers. That's first. I'm not here to play daddy to nobody. I have no children, so I won't play daddy to anybody. However, with that said, you still want to give your guys and gals all the utmost attention that they need and knowing what they are and what they need and support system around them. I think one of the biggest things with support system is people that they trust, but people that also trust you and what you're doing and having that mutual trust together. Where for some of my clients, it may be an older coach or a mentor where we get to talk and it's just like, hey, this might be the best option here and there. And having those second and third opinions is okay. Now, it's all on the player, essentially, on what they want to do, even when we present the options there. And you learn that really quick is that you only present, you're an advisor. You really solely are. You can't force someone to do something that you think is the best move because, once again, these guys' lives and careers on the line here, too. So it's the brutal nature of it. And you hope that the support system around is that. There's some clients, like in some places, in some situations that if I didn't see maybe a father or maybe a mother, a very strong character individual there to say, hey, we got you, that for me, it just wouldn't have made sense to kind of align with that. I think that's something that the character of the people around you does matter. And I think as agents, I'm saying it's your part to foster those relationships as well. And like I said, but it depends on what your client needs. I said, some guys do need a, hey, how are you doing today? Other guys just need to know, hey, here's a contract situation, good luck. And it just varies on the guy. And knowing exactly what is too much and what is too little with your clients is probably the biggest thing too. And just hitting the right sweet spot.
Let's move on to the final segment of the episode because the clock is, of course, ticking.
Yeah.
You, as someone based in the US, but deeply involved in the global football industry, what notable differences have you observed between the European landscape and the American landscape? And let's say the approaches to player development, talent scouting, but maybe just the overall football/soccer culture.
I'll give two parts. One is stability for the professional club levels for the US compared to, I think, our European counterparts for a lot of it. I think that the structure, people like to get on MLS's single entity structure, but it's stable. It's all around the stability of it all. USL, a lot of stability that exists within the leagues and it's the growth within the cities. I think that's something that very much so can be taken into like a collective that I wish that more European clubs had together instead of just playing the league together. But, the Premier League is that, right? The collective of the Premier League, that's what it was. And I wish that went down the pyramids much more. On the US side, though, I think development-wise, we're also, I can say this part of it is, it's a lot of kids. Like, once again, the country is 330 million, and we're talking about 29, about to be 30 MLS teams, about to be full academies. We're talking about 24, about to be, 25, 6, 7-ish USO championship, 12 to whatever it may be for USO 1. That's just on the men's side. Women's side, you're talking about maybe, NWSL, 14 teams? Yeah, 12 to 14, coming, going, expansion, W League. Either way, it's not enough teams for 330 million people. There's just not. And so the pathway development for kids is shattered here. And I think that's the one thing that I wish was different, where you have a lot of talent. And like I said, I can't blame the clubs because in some places they are the only thing around, right? I think Atlanta is a great example where there is one MLS academy. USL teams, there's currently one in South Georgia, and there's one that's coming in Alpharetta, in Roswell, in the Metro Atlanta area. And you're talking about 3 clubs that mostly will have the academy. So it's one at the MLS level for a population of almost 11 million, bigger than Sweden. One MLS academy for the size of Sweden population.
Wow.
That's just hard. That is hard for any club to do. That's just nothing you can do about that. And the state where, like I said, home state produces talent. Second most NFL players recently, top 5 in basketball, NBA production, MLB, talent athletes. 3 guys on the World Cup team for men's side. Talent. That getting that from where is the academy level to that next step is the biggest, is probably the biggest shattering and biggest issue that I think happens next, because there's just too much talent that needs to take that next step going forward to break into professionalism. I think that this one take a lot to it. And the rules are hard. Most kids simply can't leave before the European passport. Great for some kids, but it's very evident that for a lot of our guys that did take that chance, what it does, but a lot of us don't qualify. So where do you go from there?
It's a very tough story. On a positive note, you guys in Atlanta have an amazing stadium. To be honest, the Mercedes Benz Stadium that's just unthinkable of in Europe. Like such a beautiful. It's a real pinnacle of sports architecture. Definitely.
Yeah, it's amazing on the inside. It's very localized. Like I said, I'm an East Side kid, born and raised. A lot of the beauty that I'm proud to say that's the home stadium. It's nothing like it. There really is nothing like it in this world.
Let's move on to some of the most fascinating phenomenons of the past, let's say 365 days, and that's the transfer of Lionel Messi to Inter Miami. We did a piece about this actually. It just went out live for SoccerX TV. Shout out to SoccerX, of course.
That's like it.
If you think about this phenomenon, it's really interesting because, first of all, he not only increased revenue for Inter Miami, but he also increased revenue for all the MLS teams, because obviously his presence has led to higher ticket prices and sold-out stadiums, which potentially generated up to $265 million in revenue for Inter Miami alone, but another hundreds for the other MLS teams. Of course, the impact can be seen on the city of Miami itself. There's rise in housing values, which are on their own. They used to be also very high, and now they're getting even higher. So I don't think that's a positive thing. But of course, for real estate agents, it's definitely a good thing. And for the city itself, I mean, it's definitely boosting Miami's tourism. There's been some estimates suggesting up to 10% boost, which would mean as much as $400 million extra generated in economic activity for Miami. And my question for you is, how do you think this move of Messi to MLS reflects its growing popularity, but also commercialization of football or soccer in the US?
It's a complex question. And I'll say, like, I went to go see Inter Miami play DC United not that long ago. Messi didn't play Tata Martino, who also was former manager for Atlanta United prior. It announced it beforehand. And the difference, and I'll say that I bring it up because the difference between before the game, when there was like, okay, will he come to DC, will he not? And after, if I remember correctly, the ticket prices almost like just be nice. I think remember they dropped significantly, and that's not the first time. Chicago last year when he didn't play, I think it was like, if I remember correctly. So, and I think the situation, because like I said, injury has been touch and go this season. So that is the complexity of it. And of course, Suarez scored twice, won the game and whatnot for that game, and they ended up winning against DC United. But the complexity of it is, we're here for Messi or for Inter Miami, which is a very valid question for many people. I think that MLS is just going to be on the rise regardless. It's a great league. And it's just to be honest about it. The population is going to keep growing. It's going to keep getting better and better. I think Messi is a great point to it, yet Messi will retire in 2-3 years so. And the question has to be the lasting impact and legacy of that, right? I think that for a lot of the good of it will be that he became a focal point like Beckham did in 2007 with LA Galaxy. I think that teams also looked at the team as they was being constructed to say, that's a lot of guys there with a lot of interesting names. I know you're not coming to MLS minimums. So how are we going to do this with this? How is that going to happen? Because Miami is expensive. And these guys that made their money over in Europe made some pretty pennies. But something's not making sense. So of course, like I say that to say that with the expansion and the interest of the league rules, and I think it's going to be more investment on the player side of it, more salaries, higher salaries to that nature, which is going to be great for the league. I think that logistically makes sense. I think that one thing to take in for sure is that for teams, this is an opportunity to really capture localizing it. Messi may be the starting point, but it's on the team to localize that in relation. I say that where, of course, there's no secret about it. Messi, especially for Latino American population, which is flowers is huge in this country, that it could be one of the catalysts to also continue what's been put forward. I also say though with that the question of over-reliance can always be a thing, right? And as much like I said, I think, but I'm East Coast guy, Southern boy, East Coast guy, more or less. So my two teams I follow Infinite. I think one thing that can be done differently is definitely the spotlight has to be on not just Messi coming to town, but what we're doing with the team that he's going to go play, right? It's still 11-11, same game here. And remember correctly, Miami did not make the playoffs last year, even with winning the League Cup. So it's not like it's foolproof either. And like I said, the injury situation right now, you don't want it to be one where it becomes just a Messi show. And like I said, there's nothing that's Messi's fault about it. There's nothing he can do. But those around, that's the question. That's the question.
Nice one. You actually did follow. You literally answered my following question as well, which was, what do you think is going to happen after Messi's retirement? And I didn't even have to ask it. This is exactly how you want your podcast guests to be. Just to answer everything without you even needing to answer those questions. I'm going to finish it off with one last question I have.
Yeah.
One other thing this Messi's arrival has created was a surge in Apple TV Plus subscriptions. Apple TV Plus is the exclusive TV rights holder to the MLS. And on the day of Messi's arrival to Inter Miami, I think it was about 110,000 fans who signed up for the MLS season pass on Apple TV. And then other 65,000 signed up to be able to watch his first game. Now, with this surge in Apple TV Plus subscription, do you foresee similar trends occurring with other streaming platforms and sports league in the future? Particularly, you can talk about a Saudi Pro League, for example.
Major asterisk to the number that I think most people outside the U.S. sometimes forget, and this isn't on your Christoph, but one thing that people forget is that, and I'd say it's because this is how I got my Apple MLS pass myself. T-Mobile, which of course the German T-Mobile Telecom, the U.S. branch of it, which is extremely popular here in the U.S., had it for free for subscribers. So the number for last season, which I'm not sure if that number's ever brought up to that. But even like I say myself, my family entirely got MLS season pass because of T-Mobile, because we got T-Mobile for like 20 years at this point now. But that was something that also was not renewed this year. So I'm curious to see what that number is more than anything else, because if the number is I'm not sure if it would be a slight drop off or would it, be almost stable at that point. But I think that's something that definitely I saw from my own personal experience that was a change. With it was the free add-ons that exist throughout most of the branding and specialization parts. And I think that's something that brings it to it, where the streaming trend, I think in general it's going to be a challenge because as we're seeing here in the US with the multiple streaming sites, would it be Netflix, Hulu, also HBO Max, Paramount Plus, things of nature, that it does become tiring, and the consolidation where it has to be almost bundled. So I'm more curious to see where we go with the leagues and bundling, actually more so than just the streaming numbers itself. And like I said, that's it's geo-locked program, geo-locked issue, because Lord knows, MLS, Apple situation is very different than a lot of streaming sites where, it's Apple, right? You can watch this game. I had a chance to watch it watch the season over in Europe myself through my same, with no blackouts, which I think will be massive going down the road. So I think that's probably the differentiator between that I think will just benefit the league. I think more so than I think anyone realizes today. And I think it was probably the smartest thing for both Apple and MLS. But the geo-locking and the bundling of part of it, why the streaming numbers might be challenging. I'm curious to see, for example, whether it be the Saudi League, the Saudi Pro League, for them to throw in there. Do you bundle that? What does it look like as a package deal? Because I think it's going to be hard to ask that question in the U.S. for it. I say because right now we're having the same issue in baseball with regional sports networks, where you talk about one of the largest Valley sports, just declare bankruptcy, and the fight between MLB and the NBA relatively too on the regional side of things, where it's a lot of money and revenue done to it for the local teams on local markets. And so, and they're not being bundled into the streaming platform. So where do you go from there? And I think the geo-locking part of it is something that's really interesting for per league, whether it be Premier League, Saudi League, the J League in Japan, or maybe.
Nice one. Let's end this episode on a traditional advisory note, since our podcast is mainly created for young people looking to step their foot into the amazing industry of sports. Jeremy, if you had to give one advice to a young person who wants to become a future player agent or a sports consultant, what would the advice be?
Those classes will not help. There's no one way to do it. There's no one way to get to where you are. So your trajectory of following someone else's might not be best, and follow what works for you and the opportunity given to you. That's the one thing I would say. Take advantage of the opportunity that's given to you and stay legitimate, stay clean. Stay clean is the biggest part I'll say as well. Because you don't want your reputation to be smashed over something, especially over anything just money, ego. Stay above water as well and follow your path. It will come.
Nice one. Beautiful way to end it. Take this as a... write this down, guys, into your notepads, because that was a very good piece of final advice. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming to 12th podcast and spending this time with me. It was a great chat.
Definitely, man. Looking forward. See you in Amsterdam. Correct?
Indeed. Jeremy is also coming to the SoccerX Europe event in Amsterdam. Be sure, if you don't have them yet, you can still score your ticket soccerx.com. And thank you so much to all of you for listening to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or watching us on YouTube. Depending on where you are right now, make sure to follow or subscribe to this platform. We also are active on Instagram and TikTok, so make sure to give your followers on there as well. We have some really nice extra exclusive content that we would like all of you to watch. Yeah, that was it. Thank you so much, and until next time, keep kicking.